Thank you all for being here. We have a very, very special treat today because we're in the presence of one of the finest public-minded Indians today, and I have consistently taken inspiration from him. Many people have around the country. I urge you to Google him, and we're not going to have a big introduction after Nisha's fine job, but there are many speeches, many addresses online to check out, and we are lucky because Justice Patel has recently retired, so we're going to have a very kind of open, freewheeling conversation hopefully, and we'll be able to, I know a number of people have questions here. I'd like to start a little bit by setting the scene in a way. This is also the 40th year of WWF being in Goa, 41st year of being in Goa. I'm actually old enough to remember those days quite well. When this building was not the WWF center, but at that time, if you recall, the road ended right in front over here at just past, and there was no road for the rest of Karanjale, Taligaon, this vast kind of real estate complex that's come up, these roads next to us, the concrete kind of wave that has overwhelmed this part of Goa did not exist. There were sand dunes, it was very beautiful, and WWF's mission started then. And there's been over the years a kind of a one direction kind of deterioration of the environment. And I think all of us are kind of struggling to understand what we can do, what can be done here. But I must commend over the last, this is unplanned, but I must commend what Aditya has done over the last few years, particularly since he's taken over. I'm familiar with what WWF in the decades past, but he has repeatedly, energetically, open-mindedly taken on projects that focus directly on Goa. So we understand more about what we have here. How can we deal with it? We have a very practical, a wonderful practical. Of course, WWF is doing this nationwide, but in Goa it's been a really fine record. So let's start with a big hand for they are really people we must pay attention to and support. And so over the years, in this one-stop direction, Miramar is actually a fine example of what has happened to Goa and still what is at stake in Goa. And in this, in understanding where we are and understanding what's at stake, Justice Gautam Patel has really helped us out here in Goa. I must say, Goa has its own tremendous intellectual record. I don't want to, pat ourselves on the back at great length here. But since Justice Patel started to observe the Goan situation, Goan predicament, if you like, or the Goan situation, and passed amazing judgments again and again, it brought a lot of things into focus. What is at stake? Why are we fighting? A sane, sensible, and as a writer, I would say even poetic kind of judgments. I was speaking to Armando Gonzalez down the road, who's a grown man, who told me that he burst into tears one time when he read his judgment. And I've used, at the first time that I was a serendipity curator, I've only been one 3 times, I'm no longer one, but in the first exhibition, the artist used Justice Patel's, one of his judgments as inspiration to try and define who we are. At this point, I'm going to kind of unconventionally ask you, if you don't mind, Justice Patel delivered a phenomenal judgment about Miramar, and there's a passage in it which kind of succinctly brings us to where we are now. And since no one else can have this tweet, I wonder if we could ask Justice Patel to read it in his own voice.
Some context. This is 2017, it's the monsoon. I don't know how I've landed up here as a judge, wasn't planned. We had a particularly cantankerous Chief Justice at that time, who I think took an extreme dislike to me and decided to send me off somewhere. She said, wherever you send me off, I'm happy to go. She sort of thought I was resisting, I wasn't. And she was about to pack me off to Nagpur or Aurangabad. When I said, where are you sending me? She said, Goa. Boondocks, what damage could you possibly do there? So, several months here, but up to that point, I'd only come to Goa with the family. Literally, tourist is the wrong word for it. It was that weekend holiday packed into some resort and on a beach. But there was no real exposure to, understanding of, appreciation of, or it just didn't happen. And something flipped in 2017. I don't know if you ask me today why it flipped, how it flipped, I can't tell you, but it felt like I was coming home. It was a completely different sensation. And from the moment we got here with the family, my sister, her boys were with us, my wife was there. And the first thing we decided is we took this high court car, we were up there in that one of those bungalows in Aditya, and said, just let's get down to the beach. And we walked in at Miramar, and so the usual peanut vendors, this, that, the other, so skirted along. And the first thing that I saw was this enormous vessel grounded on Miramar beach. We all looked at it with horror. And I said, my God, what's that? So my sister and my wife said, well, we can see what it is. The question is, what are you going to do about it? We sort of put that into context. And the other context is really quite funny. My registrar called and said, you know, you have a very heavy list. So I said, how many cases? He said, 90. I said, for Monday? He said, no, for the week. No. 90 is the average in Bombay for the day, so 90 for the week wasn't a big thing. So I said, list them all on Monday. So everybody in the Goa High Court was in a bit of panic. They'd never seen a list like this. And at 10:30, this fellow gets up and says, I remember this vividly, says, I'd like to mention serial number 52 because it won't be called out today. So I said, and how do you know that? So he says, no, it's 52. Nobody does 52 batters in a day in Goa. I said, hang on a minute. Serial number 52 is lucky 7. Hold on. To 12:15 you're on to bat. Which is how this thing began. And ultimately, after several hearings, we finally got around to getting it done. The one thing we wanted done is that, look, I don't care what it takes, but get that damn vessel off the beach. Before the monsoon goes, the vessel goes. That was the one-point agenda. They flew in everybody from around the country to make stymie us, but it wasn't happening. It actually did go, so that was one great thing that happened. Let me read this. So this has happened, I don't remember the date of this, but I think it's fairly late after several hearings. Miramar Beach is a broad stretch on the west coast of the beautiful city of Panji. For the past several weeks, the beach is marred by the sight of a large vessel that has run aground on it, immediately ahead as one visits the beach from Miramar Circle. It is a very large ship, and we are given to understand, including from this petition itself, that it was a river-going vessel, not designed for use in the open seas. How this came to pass is a story in itself, one we will advert to at a later stage, only if necessary. The ship was proposed as a floating or offshore casino. Today, it is a wreck. There is a real and present danger now of damage to this beach and others down the coast. The vessel is christened, somewhat incongruously or ironically, MV Lucky 7. That is as untrue of the vessel as it is of the city and Miramar Beach. We are acutely mindful of history. Not yet faded from public memory is the incident of the MV River Princess at Colombo and what followed as damage to the beach, that beach and shoreline, plus of course, the ultimate costs of that vessel's removal. We will not permit a repetition here. We make it clear that we will not make the mistake of addressing ourselves to the relief sought by the petitioner until and unless the vessel in question is completely removed from Miramar Beach in Panji and its environs. We are not concerned how this is done, so long as there is no environmental damage. We make ourselves abundantly clear, that we will hold the petitioners responsible for the slightest environmental damage and loss caused to either Miramar Beach, the city of Panji, or any of the beaches downstream, such as Karanzale. We are aware that after mid-July 2017, when MV Lucky 7 beached herself on the sands of Miramar, there have been a series of issues, one of which we believe is now a quite sizable hole in her hull. We will not accept any of these as excuses or any other excuse about inclement weather. The monsoons and tidal conditions at this time of year can have come as no surprise to anyone. MV Lucky 7 ran aground after the monsoons began. She will lead before the monsoons end. Casinos will come and go. They are replaceable. Our beaches are not. The most terrible judgment of all is the judgment of history, and history will judge us all not by the way we care for things we can replace, but how we protect the things we cannot. Therefore, our beaches and rivers first, casinos later. Our priorities are, we believe, the same as those of the government and of the people of Goa and Panji.
I leave it to you to decide whether those priorities are the same as of the government and the people of Panjim at the moment. So what has happened, let's zoom right into this discussion. What has happened to Miramar as a test study? At the end of the pandemic, I happen to live near Miramar, so I was walking on Miramar during the pandemic. At the end of the pandemic, Miramar was a flourishing ecosystem. It was pristine, there was no garbage on it. It was clean, you had living sand dunes. The roads, since the last 40 years, roads have been built along the waterfront, but they are still sand dunes, those were living, it was robust. A series of crippling blows delivered by the city itself. There was a political rally one year, which the Prime Minister attended, which some of the dunes were flattened to create viewing platforms. A lot of infrastructure was brought into the beach. One walkway was built kind of in the cover of the second lockdown when they were actually stayed from building that walkway. But that walkway was built, that walkway now, it knocked down several hundred trees. That walkway is now fallen apart. Another bigger, larger concrete walkway has been built but largely abandoned. We are in a state where basically at this point it appears that there is impunity on encroachment and attacks on the beach and no management of it. The question is now, what can civil society do in this kind of setting? Let's start with that kind of perspective, Justice Patel. In a situation like this, what
Can I flip this format?
Yeah, sure.
Can we just interact
Yeah, sure.
with everyone here? No, I'm serious, because that's the only way this is. Otherwise, my just talking to you is not going to make any sense. This is something that you have to do. Let me just put this into some context, okay? First question here, do you agree with Vivek?
Absolutely.
Yes, not just Miramar.
Well, that's the point. Now let's just hold that for a bit.
Yeah.
So it's a much wider problem.
Yeah.
Miramar, according to you, is perhaps representative microcosm, something like this. Okay, now let's just break this down into components, because then maybe something will emerge from this. Let's not for the moment talk about filing PILs. I'll tell you why I'm saying this. PILs are a bit of a mystery bag. They're basically writ petitions. They are sometimes genuine and sometimes not. The ones that are not cause extensive damage. They're a remedy, that's one possible remedy. It's not the only remedy. We'll get to whether these are effective, whether we should use them, how we should use them, but we'll do that later. I think we need to separate this into concerns or issues, strategies, and then possible solutions. Let's try and do this in 3 different ways. One of the recurrent themes that I am reading in newspapers, and for some odd reason, I keep reading the Goa newspapers from Mumbai. I have no idea why. Is this whole concept of Goa being invaded, is this a concern? Or is it localized issues that we're talking about, what people themselves are doing? Because they're two different things. This whole concept of people from outside, from Gujarat and from Delhi and from Bombay coming in and taking over Goa, using Goa essentially as a backdrop, without really understanding or making any attempt to understand what Goa, life in Goa, culture in Goa is about. Is this a concern at all? Because if it is a concern, it's a serious concern. They are not going to care about Goa the way you care about Goa. They're not. For them, it's a state sect. So if this is a concern, then we're talking about something very, very different. If you are on the other hand talking about what local people are doing to their own land, then that's a slightly different thing. Sorry, am I making sense here? Are you getting what I'm saying? No, feel free to jump into the question or whatever it is that you have.
I think what you said is true. I mean, if you look around, there is definitely a lot of urbanization taking place. A lot of it is through people coming from all over the country and trying to buy the land and develop it.
How are you going to stop it?
I don't have all the answers. But
I'm asking, how is anybody ever going to be able to stop this? Well, okay, let's just, sorry sir, why Goa? What is it about Goa that brings people here from Noida? Wherever.
Clean air.
That's okay.
Clean air, there's no one burning rubble here. Well, that's one thing. But what is it about Goa that's bringing them in?
Nature.
You know, the flight here this morning, I promise you about a third of the aircraft was here to sign property papers. I couldn't believe it. I was just listening to these conversations around this cabin in this Air India flight, and everyone's talking to everyone. I'm going to this registrar, that to sign property papers. I said, what are you people doing? Why are you buying property in Goa? Nobody's coming to stay here. But what is it that Goa represents to these people? What's this attraction?
Money.
Money?
No, it's the retirement home.
Is it when then people retire here, they come and live here? That's not such a bad thing, is it?
Status.
No, I'm asking seriously because I'm seeing a lot of these villas being put up. North Goa has now got infested with these vados of these 6-bedroom and 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom villas with private rooms, which nobody's using. They're just renting for the weekend.
Vikram Doctor calls them villa chawls.
Yeah, they are chores. Short of hanging your clothes over the balcony, they are chores.
So in my understanding, I think a lot of people have been in urban spaces, and urban spaces don't really give you what Goa gives you in that
Are you
sense.
seeing
But,
this alienation? No, that's the point. Are you seeing this
Yes.
alienation between people who are in Goa and people who are coming here
yes.
and plonking themselves in Goa?
And Goa is not financially in that sense that if you want to maintain yourself in Goa, you've got to earn some amount. The population of Goa is not getting financially rewarded that much for all its heritage and all that stuff, right? So it's difficult for older people to maintain their houses, and then they want the money because they want to go to wherever else, Portugal or wherever else. And so they are selling their things. So if we didn't sell, then people wouldn't buy, those kind of.
But that's an aspirational issue, isn't it? People will aspire to a better life, more income, and so on and so forth. And what's the one asset that you have in Goa that they're going to be able to monetize is the land. I'm asking you, if this is an issue, how are you ever going to stop this? This is social transformation. It's not purely environmental. It is a social transformation. How are we ever going to stop this? What will you go to court and litigate? Stop outsiders from coming in? It can't be done.
But the point is, whatever they are coming to Goa for, the attraction that they are coming for is the green materially, but that's what they're destroying, and they're building more and more things such that there's not more. You're making another Mumbai here, or you're making another city here, and
No, they've got a different type of greenery. They've got those cactus plants and stuff like that.
Where is the ecosystem? Where is the whole? How is the state going to sustain itself?
Doesn't the Wildlife Act of
72,
right? Yeah, does is it not the state's duty to enforce the act, even if it involves people who private citizens?
Yes, but the problem with the Wildlife Protection Act statute is that it doesn't deal with what I call unnotified areas. You have to have an area that's designated either as a sanctuary, as a national park, or enjoys some level of statutory protection. And there's a process by which this is actually achieved by the state government.
Recently there was a mass redesignation of large areas of public land, much of which had been designated as environmental areas to allow for development.
That's happening around Mopa, that will happen around Vivek. This is a separate issue that's immediately litigatable.
Yes.
Right.
Because my view is that governments don't have the power to denotify sanctuaries and national parks that are once already notified. That's an interpretation. There are different views on this. We dealt with this once in Melghat, 1500 acres of old growth forest, and the Sharad Pawar government decided to knock off 500 acres. Nobody bothered to tell the Melghat tiger that 1/3 of his home had gone. But the question is that once it is notified, you can't by executive action denotify any part of it. It requires to go through the legislature. This is not easily done.
Things are different, sir. We can take the example of Great Goa. They have denotified long.
They have.
They have. But in case of Goa, I must tell you, the Western Ghats, the entire Western Ghats is protected. And that will be protected forever. And we have taken long-term steps in that direction, because I had long discussion and long with Mr. Parikh when I was heading the Forest Department of Goa between 15 and 19. And he said people are anti-development, you're not allowing this thing. I said, sir, give me some time, I'll explain. Goa needs two things. I said, you need water. Any place needs water if you have to survive in that area.
Correct.
Second is tourism. Tourism, the way it is going, I won't say on that, but tourism is one of the biggest, after closing down the mining industry, the tourism was sustaining the local economy largely. So I said, you need water and you need tourism. And if you cut this forest on the Western Ghats, the water is gone, and all the landslides and all which is happening elsewhere will start happening here, the beaches will be gone. So that's where, and after that, that was in 16, and after that, whatever was to be done, he was agreeing to that, from the environmental side.
But that hasn't worked, sir, has it? Because you look to take an example of... Okay, let me give you Let me give you a straightforward classic example of the Mopa airport. It should never have been done. It should never have been done. If you fly into Mopa, you're flying in over old growth reserve forests in the Doramarg area. You're seeing this. Mopa is not meant for Goa, it's meant for South Maharashtra. And the only reason that it's done in North Goa is it's too expensive to do in South Maharashtra. You probably have to acquire huge tracts of land. There's no, and the first order of the Supreme Court in Mopa trashed the EIA that they had prepared. It was a nonsensical piece of work which said there is no forest anywhere around Mopa, really. Seriously? There's no wildlife. Seriously? Mopa, what are we talking about? 2 years later, the same court flips this thing back on its head and says, well, now that they've post facto rectified the EIA, they say there are now 57 reserve forests, it's all very well to proceed. Look at the damage. What do you think is going to happen in the Mopa area? Let's take that as a case study. This will come to Miramar in a moment. Are you not going to see resorts coming up in and around Mopa? Destruction of trees, forests, wildlife, original forest cover, environmental damage. What are we going to do about it?
Mopa, I was also involved. It came to my court for clearing of trees from the High Court of Bombay. And you'll see, that 2008 when it was acquired that land, it was for centuries, at least 2 centuries it was being cultivated.
Correct.
And it was left alone. So from that point of view, it was never a protected forest or a reserve area where people...
But the impact of the airport around...
But sir, if you see my order in which on which NGT also agreed, the surroundings, slopes should never be touched.
Yeah, but the Supreme Court didn't agree with the NGT first order. That's the whole point.
No, but see, if we manage the system...
So if you're going to get into a discussion about protecting your orders against this, then we're not getting anywhere. I'm asking much more.
The issue is
MOPA worth protecting?
No,
No.
sir,
It's not worth protecting.
not the airport, I mean.
No, not the airport. I'm talking about the area around it.
Yes.
Is it worth protecting still?
It has so many springs.
Despite the airport. Now the airport's a done deal. There's nothing we're going to be able to do to go back on it. Whether it should have been there or should not have been there is something we can debate endlessly. What are we going to do to protect it? The same issues will arise when we come to Miramar. They are bound to. Are we protecting only the beach? For whose benefit are we going to protect? And then how are we going to
See,
do this?
there are two things, sir. If you see Goa, what I am seeing Goa, I live in Goa now, coastal town. North Goa and South Goa. South Goa is still pristine. A lot of areas. I'm talking about the revenue areas, not talking about the forest areas at all. They are equally good on both North and South Goa. But it's actually something within the systems. North is like, it's becoming vertical now. But South Goa, even today.
Okay, so interesting. Why?
Because CRZ when it came in 91, most of the area, this north was developed. So CRZ never impacted it. But South Goa, the 200-meter zone, that has been maintained and it's being maintained.
But that doesn't explain what we're still
But then
seeing.
the government is now, they have reduced the limits on the river side from 100 to 50.
Correct.
And that means 50 meters gone. And all our,
So I'm asking you, do we have a problem or do we not have a
we
problem?
have a problem. It's not only
What is the
Goa,
problem?
it's a problem. See,
Let's define the problem.
See, the problem is what we thought, and we have brought the acts, whether it's Wildlife Act or the CRZ and all, the way dilution is happening. As you said, no sanctuary can be denotified, they have done it in Great Nicobar.
No.
So things are...
So forgive me, you are getting into a level of detail that I have not yet reached.
Sir,
We'll get there. I want to understand from the people of Goa, this is the only reason I'm here, what precisely is the concern. I am not getting a clear focus on this. I'm telling you I'm not.
I also
It's
have one-
very bad. Okay, that's about all that
I have one quick answer and then let's go to the back. My answer is impunity. That is what is ailing us here.
No, explain that, Vivek.
Impunity means that we have gotten to a stage in Goa where internally as well as externally, we have internalized the idea you can do anything.
So it's a governance issue.
It is very much a governance
Yes.
issue.
Yes.
Is it only a governance issue?
And we also don't have a voice that is heard.
no.
Go ahead. One
Goa is very...
quick questions. Okay, please go ahead. One. Quick.
Different way.
Start from the back.
Different views.
Gentleman, young man in the back, behind you.
Yeah, you are giving him.
I think there was a framework in place in terms of how land can be converted, what defines the private forest, what defines not sure. Over time, in the recent decade, that framework has been overturned. Like there's a change, there are amendments in terms of policy.
Look, let me explain this. When you have a certain population which grows and the aspirations of which grow, there will be pressures on the environment. You're not going to be able to remain in stasis forever. You can't. Everything that everyone builds, every intervention, Arvind will tell you this, every intervention is an interference with the environment. It has to be. Now what you are telling me is zero tolerance policy? Build nothing anywhere near anyone? Is this what we are saying?
But in terms
Or
of,
are we talking about some level of balance, conservation, what?
Plan.
I think there was also like in terms of recently there have been more luxury villas, but there's been no affordable housing. There has been no housing.
Okay, so that's another issue.
Yeah.
Does Goa have a need? Mumbai does. Does Goa have a need for mass affordable housing? I don't know, I'm asking.
I don't think so.
I somehow don't get the sense that it does.
Does it?
I don't get the sense that it does. How is this a live issue in Goa? Affordable housing.
It's not.
People are feeling
Now,
priced
if you
out.
were to say luxury housing up to a point, not beyond a point, or to say luxury housing that does not affect this harm, does not knock down trees or does not alter the natural terrain, this is something that is workable. This is something, see, today's engineering and architectural techniques are so far ahead of anything that we've known before, is that you can work around any kind of topographical constraint that is placed on you. You want an example of this? You have to go to the hills above Dehradun, where they've said no tree felling. People are still building houses. They've still got driveways that will ruin your knees because they go at these ridiculous angles. Cars have to go up in weird ways, but they don't lose tree cover. There's a
Is it
complete
because-
blank, there's a complete ban. You can't fell a single tree, no matter what.
Does it gets enforced?
It gets enforced, you're just not allowed to knock off a tree.
That's what happens here. It doesn't get enforced. I'll give you a quick example.
Okay, so enforcement is an issue. The kind of development is an issue. Is this what we're talking about?
Yes.
And are we talking about private or are we talking about investment in public infrastructure? They're two slightly different things.
I think the large scale issue, I think, is the public.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, I'm just going to put this out there. I think this has hijacked this whole conversation. You jump in whenever you want. No, I'm asking you this. There's a huge difference between being opposed to a privately owned development and opposing a public development. They're two different things. They're conceptually two different things. If the government is doing something through PWD on a public space, Miramar Beach, that's a very different thing from the kind of private development you'll see on a hillside near Gautam. They're two different things, they're two different issues, they're two different concerns, and the litigation is entirely different. One is the citizen pitted against the government about lands that are the commons, commonly owned by all. The other is a far more difficult enterprise where you are saying that Mr. XYZ Limited, XYZ Realty Limited, is putting up this whacking great development somewhere. And we have an objection to it. They are going to come in with all their top legal armory against you. You have to bring to bear a completely different set of skills to be able to combat that. I'm not saying it can't be done. It has been done. In fact, my earliest experiences with PIL was in Bombay in urban planning issues, precisely on this, taking on individual developers who were breaching the law and putting up monster structures in complete violation of what the law permitted. We succeeded in every single one of those. But we were dealing with it very differently from the petitions where we were trying to save the forests of Mahabaleshwar, Matheran, and in that entire, well, there are two different petitions. There are two different petition types. Don't conflate one with the other. When you are against the government, it's one thing. When you are against private party and the government, it's a totally different thing. Now, when we are dealing with Miramar, which are we dealing with? Both?
We have a peculiar situation in Miramar itself along the Hampi River, where the government was proposing a roadway project. And this was a project actually to favor a public-private party, which the government was then interpreting as a public project for transportation.
Okay, they've
When
always
we
done.
asked for other questions, when we asked questions over there, we discovered that it was going to cost something like 600 for a person to move from Where to
This is the simplest form of writ petition, and you can say this is a fraud on statute.
Yes.
This is a petition that will fly. because it's being done by the government, and the moment the government does it to benefit a particular private party, you've got a sitter of a petition and the court will come to your assistance immediately. You have to be clear that you have no personal interest in this, you're not in a tangle with that particular person, and that you marshaled your facts correctly. Beyond this, I don't see any problem in a court interfering, and the courts will see through this immediately, because obviously everywhere, Goa is not the only government. Maharashtra does it, Gujarat does it. Every ropeway, because it's moving a body from point A to point B, becomes transportation. It's like they borrowed it out of Star Trek or something. It's really weird. Sort of beam me up, Scotty. You know, it's that kind of thing. It's not a transportation project. We know that it's not a. The second thing that will happen is that they'll tell you it's a tourist attraction. People go on a joyride apparently on a ropeway. I don't know why anyone would want to do it, but it's the terrestrial equivalent of parasailing. You're connected by a wire. Unnecessary. And it's easy to identify, and Aditya and his team can easily identify the environmental damage that is inevitable from a project of this kind. It requires stanchions, it requires ropes, it requires pulleys, it requires generators, all the rest of this can easily be done. And this is where someone like WWF comes in. You look at that environment and say, this is the value. Nesting sites of turtles, wildlife, beach life, marine life. All of this can be put together in one petition. This will work. I have no problems with this petition working. Who is to be the petitioner here?
So, right now it's the
No, who's we?
people of Pandemic Goa are fighting this.
No, I want to know
You
what is the nature of that group?
The nature of group is a public interest group who's concerned about these kind of.
No, don't do this. I'm telling you, don't do this. The moment you have 10 individuals coming in, the easiest thing for the government to do is to treat you like ducks in a row and then pick you off one by one. Don't do this. Your strength is in numbers. Your strength is in forming a coalition and forming a group. Even if it's an association of persons, it's not a registered trust. The moment there's a group, because then the membership of that group will keep changing, but the focus of that group is defined. Come together as a group. Then you have a list of members. There are 100 people who are members of this group. All 100 don't have to be petitioners. One who is your general secretary is the petitioner. And the group itself is the petitioner. Very difficult to dislodge the standing and the bona fides of a group that is formed like this. And it's much easier to sustain in a litigation, because the moment you have individuals, well, who's going to pay for this and who's going to pay for that, and this is what it costs and who's going to court. When you have a group and you set out to do something like this, organize yourselves. If you are not organized, you will lose. I've seen more petitions lost because, look, judges were helpless, they were just not organized. You had to let it go. You can't keep that petition live and going no matter what you do. If the petitioners have fallen apart, how is this to work? So please organize. The Save Miramar Foundation. So great.
Have you seen good examples like this in other parts of the country?
Oh yes, we're working with many of them. Look, I began with the Bombay Environmental Action Group.
Oh
There was
yes.
the same.
Johnson and
No, Sham Chainani and
Oh,
Rasan
right.
and all of us were there when that began. There was Kisan Mehta's Save Bombay Committee. There's now the Conservation Action Trust, which does the wildlife stuff, which I'm on the board there. But we're all organized as a group, so what goes to court is one of these bodies. Today, if you ask the lawyers in Bombay, they will still tell you that they remember the work that something like the Bombay Environmental Action Group did, and no judge ever allowed any lawyer to question the standing or the bona fides of a group. So what have you individually, what have you as a group, what is your personal interest in this? None. You're dealing with the broader public interest. It solves 50% of the problem. Focus on the issue. Don't allow the court to be distracted by who you are. Make sure the court focuses on what you're saying when we come to that. A court litigation is, of course, in my view, still the last strategy. I wouldn't say it's always the optimal one, but you go to it when everything else has failed. And by everything else, I mean through the organization, making a very, very strong pitch to the agency why this should not be done. You may not succeed at first, but when you keep doing this, you'll be amazed at how effective it is. And I'll tell you this as an example. It's actually quite funny. So we were taking on all these errant builders in Mumbai and Pune. I was drafting the petitions, Shyam Chairani was General Secretary, I was in some capacity or the other thing. And we were litigating them left and right. And then at some point, one summer, Mr. Shyam Chairani decided he was going to Pune for a holiday. Wasn't related to work. He checked himself in at some of the clubs, he was a member of every club under the sun. So checked himself in. And 3 or 4 builders heard that Shyam Chairani was camped in Pune and they started bringing down their buildings on the footing that it was cheaper to demolish than to pay the lawyers to protect those buildings because these people were going to fight against it. So you build a reputation for this and you make it happen. See, you don't need one Goa foundation, you need 1,000 Goa foundations. You need tons of them. There's a limit to what Norma and Claude are going to be able to do for all of us. But you need many, many more of them all working together in tandem to face the same thing. So Miramar ropeway is one example. Development, you were saying, on the beach.
They built these walkways. You know, there's a lot of encroachment on the sands. What would be protected?
No, is it private or is it public?
It's all public. It's all done by the government, very often under the... So, you know, this thing about the courts, very often the city of Panjam has either ignored or waited out, you know, public, even the courts or public opprobrium. There's a kind of a grinding one-way street. I mean, every possible, when we go to Panjam this evening, you can see every possible deadline has not been met. Every promise has not been met. Work is transparently shoddy. I mean, there's a thing that's been really bothering me the last 1 week because now they've torn up around Azad Maidan, is we are literally seeing India's poorest of the poor with their families laboring without equipment and training to tear apart something that is quasi decent and put in something that will not last through even half a monsoon. I mean, terribly done. So there's a whole cascading, there's a cascading set of impunity.
I don't know. Something badly done is horribly subjective.
Oh, let's.
See, I'm trying to
no
say-
training, no equipment. You know.
That's a different issue, no?
Yeah.
No, I'm asking, look, I want to put this. Anything that you get to court must have a certain amount of objectivity to it. That you have to be able to show this is the environmental damage that has been done. There are well-established legal principles behind this. If the government in Panji decides to put in a concretized walkway, it is a project proponent, then alright. Can I ask this question? Can Aditya, Kakodkar and WWF or equivalent show with cogent material that the walkway will inevitably cause X, Y, Z damage and is not benign? If you have this material, a court is an answer, but before you go to court, you have to make this representation to the executing agency saying, stop, It is what in law we call a demand for justice. You have to point out to that agency that this is what your work is going to result in. Therefore, stop it. When they refuse to answer, when they refuse to accept your demand, that's actionable. That's actionable. On various grounds, as being arbitrary, illogical, this, that, the other, violating any number of your fundamental rights under Part 3 of the Constitution of India. You can get there, but you have to be organized, you have to be focused on the issue, and Vivek, don't muddle issues. The surest way to fail on all is to try and ride several horses at the same time. Just don't do it. If you are dealing with the beach at Miramar, only deal with the beach at Miramar. It's the Miramar beach petition. Identify the issues, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 down the line. But back every single one of these with material that you have. Otherwise, very difficult.
Until now we have been speaking about one project. So I'm going to take you away from the Miramar beach and ask you what happens if there is a concession in law. For example, Forest Protection Act, there is a concession for Goa on the lines of Uttarakhand, where around 250 square meters of construction is allowed in the reserve forest, because we were discussing the reserve forest.
This you cannot by persuasion or representation roll back. This you have to challenge in a court of law, and you have to bring this as a constitutional challenge. And this can't be done.
Which constitution?
No, I'm talking generally. I don't know which one he's talking about in particular.
So, I think a year back or so, the Union Ministry has given a concession on the lines of Uttarakhand, which allows, and it's very unique because it's in Goa, in Uttarakhand, where in the reserve forest, as a dwelling, you can build up to 250 square meters.
Maybe private forest you're talking about.
Reserve
Forest, there is
forest.
more than
So deemed forest, reserve forest.
See, in a reserve, you see again. Let's be clear about this.
Not reserve.
In a reserve forest, this is very difficult because in reserve forest, with the Forest Conservation Act, you will not be able to use any part of the forest for non-forest purposes without central government clearance. It just can't be done. Now, if this is an exemption to what are called private forests, which are under a separate statute where they privately held lands are vested in the state government, that's a separate challenge, but you can certainly challenge it. You can find some sort of a challenge. Will it fly or not fly? Lawyers will tell you, consultants will tell you. But you also in this need to work out what is the extent of the damage likely to be caused. If it's going to be trivial, is it worth chasing? There are many issues in Goa. One of these issues that I think Karanjit, you mentioned this as well in one of the last pieces that I read, that this whole idea of people swimming in millions by giving, that's the phrase you used, I think, but by selling off chunks of land. But how are you going to stop this? How are you going to stop this? Somebody in Goa just wants a better
Let me speak.
life.
How we are going to stop this? Let me speak. There is too much of money in the country.
Well,
At present, too much money.
I have a great solution to that. Give it to me.
I will give you listen to my people. And the money is either in Delhi or in Mumbai. And not in Goa.
Always has been.
I don't know why they are saying Goa GDP is 7 lakhs, highest in the country.
Okay.
I don't know that. This money in Delhi is in the wrong hands. I can say wrong hands. They have no attitude. They don't know how to spend it. The only way they will spend is building villas, this, that. And where to build it? The best place is Goa. Peaceful. All these things happened many years back, not now.
Sir,
The buying of
do you have
the
a
land.
question? Do you have a question?
Question is there anything like cultural destruction?
No.
Cultural destruction, destruction of culture, destruction of environment is there. Is there any legislation?
Okay, any more questions?
No, there isn't.
That is
There
cultural
can't be.
destruction.
There We can't agree on what our culture is.
It's like
Any more questions?
Uttarakhand has an act. No non-Uttarakhand can buy a piece of land. Himachal has a very strong.
So Himachal has a very strong piece. Where people are finding ways around this, but still. But am I not wrong that for quite a long time Goa had a similar restriction?
No,
Never.
Or it never had?
Never.
Himachal has always had it.
Very strong.
And it actually works quite effectively because it prevents an influx of lands passing into property.
You have
But
to marry
here-
somebody or you have
That restriction was, I think, more on agriculture and orchard lands.
Yeah.
Orchard
Not
land
on-
has been
not on-
opened now for development. So any orchard land which was there.
No, the question is, yes,
And
sorry.
it's mostly a mix of it's not actually grown
No,
up.
I'm still trying to understand that if we take this in the context of Miramar, which is a well-defined, geographically well-defined stretch, can we at least identify the specific concerns rather than the larger concerns of Goa's culture being destroyed and what's happening throughout Goa? On this stretch, since these are the Miramar manors and we're concerned with this, what are the specific issues? The walkways, concretized walkways on the beach and the beachfront is one. What else are we talking about?
One is the sand dunes which were earlier protected.
That's part of the same thing, I think.
Yeah, but not the walkways actually, but now construction is allowed on the seaward side, and
Okay, so construction on the beaches.
yeah,
Construction on the beaches, walkways, what else?
and there's a huge building like which is proposed at opposite the Mandovi hotel which was there, which is going to be run by casinos, and there's no place for
See,
parking.
the casino thing is a separate issue that because it does affect Panji and possibly Miramar.
even the water quality.
Let's just park casinos for the time being.
No,
That's
the point is that they have sort of justified it in the sense that there is one building beyond that area. So in that whole line,
We have
it can be
challenged
built.
this. We have challenged this. They were trying to change the zone of that
entire area.
water deck space.
Okay.
And we could get them to retreat on that. They had already passed some resolutions in the town and country planning department. It was being promoted by the Goa Tourism Department.
But this is a public building that is being put up or is it private?
It's a public space. There was it was leased out to Mandovis for so many years. That lease period has expired. Now the government is exploring giving it out again to some other use.
Yeah.
But even when it was run by the Mandovis, the condition was that space, because it was earlier part of a little waterfront and a beach,
Should be kept open.
yeah, should be kept available for the public. And Mandovis was allowed only when there was an event, like a wedding or something.
See, Armino, this is very
To restrict.
interesting because let me tell you in law what this says.
Yeah.
There is therefore, this is public land leased to Mandovi at that time.
That's right.
Now, because that lease has expired, being given on the same terms, there is a compelling case to be made out why this should be retained for public use as part of the commons, and this can be perhaps pitched as high as a covenant that runs with the land and dedicate this for public use. There is a good argument to be made here and a good thing to take to court. So this is one issue that we can definitely see there. What are the others along, and beaches, dunes, this building, what else?
The beach was recovered in many ways by the National Institute of Yeah. They had done a whole planting of those conifers, coconut trees, and they allowed this whole what do you would say, shrubs to catch on the sand, and in the process they managed to restore the beach. All right, and they wouldn't allow anybody to do any construction on the beach side of the road. So although the road extended all the way till Donapala, on the beach side of the road, no construction was permitted. Now they have gone and done this whole parking lots.
So there are a whole bunch of new things,
Yeah,
public and
and
private.
the thing is that every time we say that this is for public use, it's not. The parking lot over here is served 2-3 hotels owned by the minister, who just got 2 hotels over here. So he has very limited parking within his building. All the parking that is happening is outside.
Okay, so now this is two, sorry, we'll just come back to that, just give me 2 minutes. There are just 2 issues here, Armino, so let me clear about this. The first, or the second issue first. which is that is being used by the minister, is really an issue of course it's an issue of corruption. But it's a second issue to take up, that this is a camouflage where a public work is being taken up ostensibly for the public but actually to benefit a private. Therefore you say this is malafide, therefore this is again a misuse of power, and there's a whole raft of legal principles that apply to this. The more fundamental question is, and this from the urban planning perspective, perhaps you should ask, should you have any construction at all on the beach side?
It should.
No matter what the public demands, pressures, parking, roads, should there be any further building work westward towards the beach? If that, no, I'm asking you this, if that is your line, take that as a hard line and stick to it. And stick to it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether Panji needs more parking, build underground parking. I mean, go to Pato, go to wherever they need to go, of course. Build a multi-story parking tower there, nobody cares. Not here. Not on the beach. But take that line. The moment you say, this is okay, but that is not, there's a color that attaches to you saying, why are you saying this is okay, but that is not? Are you genuine? Never make that mistake. CRZ, our line was, we don't care how pure you people are, if this is the law, this is the law. You can't violate it. No matter how desirable your project on that side of it. Can't be done. Finished. You want to change the law, change the law. But not while this law exists. But you can't have this halfway house. This will land you into difficulties where the government will laugh at you when you make a representation. They'll say you supported this but you're opposing this. Don't do that. Sorry.
I don't know, Luis, you had some time. Okay, two more. Go ahead, Luis, go ahead. Start.
So I come from a little island, and a lot of my islanders sitting here as well. And anyway, in the first place, I would like to thank you for your love for Goa. We are very proud about that.
Thank you.
And we're very lucky about that. So about my island, basically it's an agricultural island. But today there's no agriculture there happening at all because it's totally destroyed agriculture. And it's very strange because everything looks very green. But instead of we being able to grow agricultural produce, it's all turning green with mangroves. So this is because of degradation of systems and various other things which were in place. I'm sure.
But that's a completely different issue.
It's environmental.
It's a completely different issue. We're not really discussing environmental issues generally. I am a great proponent and adherent of mangroves wherever I find them. So
you would think
there's no great outpouring of sympathy for you there.
So in this case, the agricultural land where rice and other vegetables.
It doesn't matter. If there were mangroves there, I'm all for it.
He's talking about there's a very good system.
Mangroves. We have mangroves.
There were never mangroves there.
And we have the mangroves ban here, right? Aren't you a mangrove?
Correct. Mangroves ban. We all unite with the mangroves
This issue
ban.
is particular in Goa where the Kazan lands were left.
Correct.
And then the water is inundating. That's a different issue. It is not.
Yeah, but there is a very thin line.
Environmental degradation.
Yes.
You're better off with the mangroves because there's protection for mangroves in law. There's no protection for paddy fields, and tomorrow your paddy fields will go and will become housing towns. So you're much better off with mangroves, trust me. Your mangroves are part of wetlands, they're protected in law. Please be happy with the mangroves.
Practical answer.
Eat less rice.
You have a question?
In any case, it's coming from
Our island is nothing else.
No, questions.
Only question.
Only question.
Only question. Little. See, I'm not worried about Miramar Beach.
But
It's
then
a
we
one
are
case for me.
One case.
but then that's,
During Portuguese time, we used to go there. Sand was very white, very nice. Now if you see, I don't go there for years. I have not gone there for years. What we are worried is about the so-called development inside Goa. in the villages.
But that will do in the next session. Today we are only here for Miramar.
Whatever. Miramar is okay. Goan case. We will fight.
No, that's all right. We'll keep fighting.
We will grow.
It can't be.
We didn't get a question from him yet. Please go ahead.
We have to protect.
See, this thing I want to add. Goans are always open to people coming. Goan are more globalized citizens.
Correct.
Because so we don't have any resistance to people coming and staying. And then development, everyone wants development money. It's not this thing. The problem here lies is the not recognition of unique ecosystem Goa has, like sand dunes, mangroves, and like lateritic plateaus where we conducted the program, hill slopes, the water channels. We have huge heavy rain and there are water draining this, and there is unique biodiversity in those streams also. The freshwater fishes. So these are not recognized. So my question is, like, if I want to fight for lateritic plateaus, or if I want to fight for mangroves, or if somebody want to fight for sand dunes, because these are there in revenue lands, not in the forest lands. So these are not there in, these are in private lands. But then they are not recognized in the law agency that these are the unique, and then they require a unique set of model for development. Like I am not resisting giving a permission for development, but give it in a like there should be a rules and regulation unique to that place. This place should be developed like this. So if we want to develop such rules and regulations, I think perhaps in India first time this is happening, that such a unique biodiversity rich place is getting so developed. I don't know, you may have some more examples. So is there Dehradun has done something in this way?
Okay, let's just start. This is a very interesting question. I think I've got an answer to this, but it might be different. Shall we bundle 2 or 3 more questions together and see?
May I just add, I think this is a very crucial issue.
It is.
Yeah, this is the point.
It is. I'll tell you, I've got some thoughts on this, and it has nothing to do with litigation. Let's just see whether it combines.
Add up to the previous dialogue on like issues on Miramar stretch. The Kakodkar stretch will be very similar earlier. Right now, there's a lot of sewage dumping, and which is led to.
That's a domestic municipal issue. That's easily solved because it's the same thing as garbage and sewage handling at Kalangut or Kandoli, where they don't have facilities. It's the same thing almost in every panchayat that you go up and down Goa. So these are issues that you can definitely say they have to make some arrangements for this. How are you granting building permissions without an assurance of water supply, sanitation, and disposal of garbages? These are, nobody's asking the court to make them up. Under the Environment Protection Act, these are all mandated, they're all there. They have to be done. This question is very interesting. Let me just tell you what happens. What's the kind of Goa that's projected as you enter Goa, let us say from either of these airports? Just look at the pictures.
It's an investment destination.
Just not investments. Look at what is being projected.
Casinos.
Not even casinos. I am saying that these elements that he is talking about, laterite, natural bodies, are not in anybody's frame of reference. They are not there in the conversation at all. They are simply avenue of coconut trees. These windows that you see at WD Airport, with all these pretty pictures inside them, it's just nonsensical. This is meant for somebody who is coming here for a weekend, probably to get completely drunk and then go out. This is nothing to do with Goa. What you need to do, and this is, I'm very serious about this, so conceptualize this. Identify these various factors and make the pitch that in any development, private or public, that happens, as a matter of promoting tourism, conservation strategies must include protecting these items one by one, build a local law around it. Build a local law around it. Now that law will go through various permutations, combinations, contestations and all the rest of this. But unless you identify them and bring them into the forefront, this is never going to happen.
But this 2021 plan, master plan, which was under development for last decade,
I have not studied it.
but it has been put to so much of changes, and all these things which you have raised, the springs and all those things have been actually marked over there. The sand dunes.
Not marked, I'm not talking about marking.
No, there's a zoning. Zoning has been.
I'm not talking about zoning. I am talking about their integration and preservation while permitting any development to happen thereafter. A natural water body or a water course must be protected while you are doing a development, no matter what the size of it is. For example, if you are in an area that has a massive amount of laterite, how do you protect it? You know, there will be strategies, conservation strategies. These are not conservation only of the building, it's the conservation of the environment. See, I tell you, the thing that bothers me about Goa is that people are too damn silent. Start shouting. Make a noise. Just get a lot more raucous about this, for God's sake. You're saying, going Goa, gone? Not yet. Not yet. And not while we are still here and able to do something about it.
We agree.
No, let's not have any more of these things. Let's just get out there and do it.
Eco-sensitive area, for example, again that has been happening. So many villages have been brought under that protection plan, you can say. And South Goa actually, again if you see, they are vehemently opposing.
Why don't we do this?
But they
Look at this,
are-
I'm just going to ask you this. Can we agree today that you will form with some appropriate name that Vivek will conjure up, because he's very good at conjuring up these things, a group that works for the protection, improvement and restoration of Miramar? Viva! Viva! Do it! Do it! They give it a structure. And that's the one that will move forward. That's what we need to do. That will then have the focus. Draw up its charter. Send it to me.
Yes.
Will I look at it?
Aditya.
Draw up a charter.
Vivek,
This is what our focus is.
go for blue flag beach certification.
That's
Mirabar
right.
was proposed.
That's correct.
Mirabar was proposed.
Yeah.
But the water quality here, 100
I remember.
E. coli per.
And then you can get to whichever authority, body, court, whatever, saying we are this focus group. Our job is, I'm not just speculating, to protect the entire stretch of Miramar in all its forms and in every aspect. That's your anthem. That's your charter. You do it for Miramar, you do it for other parts of
And
Goa.
on that note, so we have tied up with Radio 92.7 Vivek. So I request Ajay Namrata to come forward, and she has a question from the listeners of the radio channel.
I must say that we don't have much questions because
We answered them all.
Justice was here, so we couldn't find more questions because I think most of the things you have covered. Thank you so much for being here, and it's a great opportunity to be part of WWF-India Dialogues. We yesterday spoke to Vivek and got the insights of what we were trying to do. I have only one question from actually Gautam Desai. He says, as an individual, what I can do, what rights I have to do a change. For example, if I can do something for Miramar, as an individual, what do I do?
As an individual, it will always be difficult because you will be pitted against governments or big businesses or big corporates. Where you have your rights, the rights assured to citizens under the Constitution itself. But taking these to any meaningful level means a huge investment of energy, time, resources and money at the end of it. Because all of this thing at some point costs and you've got to be sort of monomaniacally focused on it. You are much better off and your greatest strength is in numbers. Come together and do this together. Everybody is voicing similar concerns. Let's just do this in a collective voice. Isn't that going to be more effective?
Absolutely. I think that was the core of the response. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving forward, I'd like to thank both of our guests today.